At a family dinner, she declared, "My ex will always be part of my life. If you don't like that, don't marry me." Everyone stared at me. I just said, okay. By the next week, invitations were canceled, and she realized the marriage was too... It all came to a head at a Sunday dinner. One of those tense pre-wedding family gatherings where two tribes who have nothing in common are forced to pretend they're about to be joined for life. My parents, a quiet, traditional couple who have been married for 40 years, were on one side of the table. On the other side were my fiancée, Clara's parents, a pair of retired therapists who spoke in a language of pop psychology and believed every boundary was a suggestion. And in the middle of it all was Leo. Leo was Clara's ex-boyfriend, but to hear her and her family tell it, he was more like a spiritual brother, an essential part of her personal ecosystem. He was at every holiday, every birthday, every dinner. He had a key to her parents' house. He was the constant smug ghost at the feast of our relationship. I'd made my feelings about him clear from the beginning. I'm not a jealous man, but I believe in boundaries. I believe a past relationship should be in the past, not sitting at your dinner table making inside jokes with your future wife. My objections were always met with the same condescending lecture from Clara and her parents about my possessive masculine tendencies and my inability to embrace a more fluid, modern concept of family. They treated my traditional values like a charming but ultimately primitive character flaw. I went along with it, not because I was a simp, but because I was playing the long game. I wanted to see how far she would push it. I needed to know if the foundation we were building on was solid rock or just sand. The topic of the wedding seating chart came up over dessert. My mother, a woman who speaks her mind with a quiet but firm dignity, had a simple question. "Clara, dear," she began, looking at the draft of the chart. "I see you have Leo seated at the main family table, next to your aunt. I was just wondering if that was the best place for him. Perhaps one of the friends' tables would be more appropriate?" The air in the room instantly went from chilly to arctic. Clara's mother put her fork down with a clatter. Clara herself flushed a deep, angry red. "My mother is just concerned about optics, Clara," I said, stepping in before she could explode. "Having your ex-boyfriend at the family table might send a confusing message to our guests." Clara turned on me, her eyes flashing. "A confusing message? The only confusing message here is that you and your parents are still living in the 1950s. Leo is my best friend. He is family. He was a part of my life long before you were, and he will be a part of my life long after. Well, he will always be a part of my life." Her father chimed in then, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ben, we've talked about this. Your rigid definitions of relationships are what cause insecurity. Clara and Leo have a beautiful, evolved connection. You should be celebrating that, not trying to control it." It was a perfectly executed 2-on-1 attack, with her mother nodding in solemn agreement. They had been practicing this kind of psychological maneuvering for years. But this time it was different. This time, my parents were there, watching this woman and her family treat me and our impending marriage with such casual, arrogant disrespect. Clara, feeling emboldened by her parents' support, decided to press her advantage. She stood up, her hands on her hips, and delivered the line that would bring the entire charade to a crashing halt. She looked from my mother to me, her voice loud and clear for the entire room to hear. "Let me make this perfectly clear for everyone. My ex will always be a part of my life. He will be at our wedding. He will be at our children's baptisms. He will be at our holidays. That is a non-negotiable fact. If you don't like that, then don't marry me." The ultimatum hung in the silent room. It was a declaration of war. Everyone stared at me, waiting for my reaction. They expected me to argue, to plead, to back down as I had done so many times before, just to keep the peace. Clara had a smug, triumphant look on her face. She thought she had me trapped. I didn't say a word for a full minute. I looked at her, standing there in all her defiant arrogance. I looked at her enabling parents, nodding in approval. I looked at my own parents, their faces a mixture of shock and quiet dignity, and then I looked back at her. The long game was over. She had just shown me the final stress test results, and the structure was condemned. I gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," I said. The word was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, that it seemed to confuse her. "Okay?" she repeated, her tone mocking. Okay, you'll behave? Okay, you'll stop being a jealous child? No, I said, standing up from the table. I folded my napkin and placed it on my plate. Okay, I won't marry you. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, we're leaving. And without another look at Clara or her stunned, speechless family, the three of us walked out of the house and out of their lives. Update 1. The drive home with my parents was silent for the first 10 minutes. My father just drove, his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. My mother stared out the window. I think they were waiting for me to break down, to show some sign of regret or heartbreak. But I felt nothing but a profound, almost surreal sense of peace. The weight of a 5-year charade had just been lifted from my shoulders. Finally, my dad spoke, his voice low and steady. Are you sure about this, son? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said. My mother turned around from the passenger seat. There were no tears in her eyes, just a quiet, fierce pride. Good, she said. She was not the one for you. We were just waiting for you to see it. When I got back to my own house, the house I had bought, the one Clara had been living in for the past 2 years, my phone was a war zone. Dozens of missed calls, a flood of texts from Clara, her parents, her friends, even from Leo himself. They ranged from furious to confused to pleading. Clara, what was that? You just walked out? You can't be serious. Clara's mom, Ben, you have deeply hurt our daughter. You need to come back and apologize immediately. Leo, dude, what the hell is your problem? You're blowing this way out of proportion. They were all operating under the same delusion, that this was a tantrum, a momentary fit of pique that could be smoothed over with a few condescending lectures and a non-apology. They hadn't yet grasped the finality of the word okay. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I made a single phone call. It was to our wedding planner, a woman named Cynthia, who was a consummate professional. Cynthia, I said, it's Ben. There's been a change of plans. The wedding is off, permanently. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. What? Ben, the invitations are scheduled to be mailed out tomorrow morning. I need you to stop that immediately, I said. Do not send out a single invitation. As for the rest of it, I need you to begin the cancellation process for all vendors. My fiancée and her family will be your point of contact for all financial matters moving forward. They were handling the payments, so they will need to handle the refunds and the cancellation fees. This was a crucial part of my strategy. I hadn't paid for the wedding. Her father had, a fact he had made sure everyone was aware of. Now the financial burden of unwinding a massive 6-figure event was his problem, not mine. The next morning, the real shockwave hit. Cynthia, doing her job with ruthless efficiency, began making the calls. The first one, of course, was to Clara's parents. I would have paid $1,000 to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. The caterer, the florist, the band, the venue, each call was another nail in the coffin of their grand social event. Another massive, non-refundable deposit lost. Clara's father called me, his voice a strangled roar. What have you done? Do you know how much money we are losing? You can't just do this. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice calm. I just accepted your daughter's terms. She gave me an ultimatum. Accept her ex-boyfriend as a permanent fixture in our marriage, or don't marry her. I chose the latter. I respected her boundary. The consequences of that choice are now yours to manage. He started sputtering about lawyers and lawsuits and breach of promise. Breach of promise? I laughed, a cold, empty sound. You were there, Richard. You heard her. You have a dozen witnesses who heard her deliver an ultimatum at a family dinner. She made the continuation of our marriage conditional, and I simply declined the conditions. There is no lawsuit. There is only the bill for a party you are no longer hosting. I hung up. The next person to appear was Clara herself. She showed up at my house that afternoon, using her key to let herself in. She found me in the living room, surrounded by empty boxes. I was packing her things. What are you doing? She shrieked, her face a mask of disbelief. I'm helping you move, I said, not even looking up. You're going to need to find a new place to live. You can't kick me out. I live here. No, Clara, I said, finally standing up to face her. You have been staying here. This is my house. My name is on the deed, and your invitation has been revoked. I'll be changing the locks tomorrow. I suggest you arrange for your parents to come and pick up your belongings. She finally broke down. the arrogant, confident facade crumbling to reveal the terrified, entitled child underneath. She cried. She begged. She pleaded. She said she didn't mean it, that it was just a stupid thing to say, that she loved me. I just stood there, unmoved. The time for that, Clara, was when my mother was at your dinner table, being treated with disrespect. The time for that was before you made your ex-boyfriend a condition of our marriage. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Update 2. The 30 days that followed were a slow, brutal education for Clara in the concept of consequences. She and her family had lived their entire lives in a soft, padded world of second chances and consequence-free choices, a world cushioned by their money and their shared delusion of intellectual superiority. That world was now gone. The first lesson was financial. Her father, after a week of threats and bluster, finally realized I was not going to contribute a single cent to the financial disaster of the canceled wedding. The final bill for the lost deposits and cancellation fees, I heard, was close to $100,000. It was a staggering blow, even for them. The second lesson was social. They tried to spin the narrative, of course. They told their friends that I was emotionally unstable, that I had a breakdown, and called off the wedding for no reason. But the story was too good, too juicy. A dozen people had been at that dinner. The story of Clara's ultimatum and my quiet, final acceptance spread like wildfire through their social circle. She wasn't the victim. She was the arrogant fiancé who had overplayed her hand and lost everything. Clara, after being forced to move out of my house, had to move back in with her parents. The atmosphere in that house, I was told, was toxic. Her parents, facing a massive financial loss and a public humiliation, resented her. They were constantly fighting, the thin veneer of their evolved family dynamic stripped away to reveal the bitter, dysfunctional reality underneath. Leo, the ex-boyfriend, the man who was so essential to her life, proved to be less than useless in a real crisis. He was a fun accessory for a woman who had a stable, successful fiancé. He was not interested in being the support system for a broke, unemployed, and emotionally volatile single woman. He slowly, quietly began to distance himself. The constant calls and texts stopped. He was busy. He had other plans. He was, in the end, just another fair-weather friend. While her world was burning down, I was quietly rebuilding mine. I took a 2-week trip to Europe, a trip I had always wanted to take but had put off because Clara had no interest in it. I came back feeling refreshed and clear-headed. I focused on my work, landing the biggest project of my career. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away. Friends who had never liked the person I became when I was with Clara. I didn't date. I wasn't interested. I was enjoying the peace, the quiet, the freedom of a life that was entirely my own. A life where I didn't have to constantly navigate the emotional minefield of another person's insecurities. The final and most satisfying lesson for Clara came about 6 months after our breakup. A major architectural journal published a feature on a historic theater I had spent the last 2 years restoring. It was a huge honor, the pinnacle of my career so far. The article included a gala event celebrating the reopening of the theater, an event attended by the mayor and some of the most influential people in the city. There was a picture of me standing on the stage accepting an award for the project. Final update: it's been a little over a year since that Sunday dinner. My life has moved on in ways I never could have imagined. My company has grown, and the success of the theater project has opened doors I never knew existed. I sold my old house and bought a beautiful loft downtown, a place that is entirely me, all clean lines, exposed brick, and industrial steel. I started dating again about 6 months ago. Her name is Sarah. She's a doctor. She's kind, she's brilliant, and she has a backbone of steel. Her family is wonderful, a loud, loving Italian clan who welcomed me with open arms and too much pasta. Her past is her past, and my past is mine. We are building a future together, a future based on mutual respect and clear, honest boundaries. I hadn't seen or spoken to Clara in over a year. I had blocked her and her entire family on everything. But I heard things through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances. Her parents had been forced to sell their large house and downsize to a condo. The financial hit from the wedding, combined with some of her father's other creative financial ventures going south, had crippled them. Clara was still living with them. She had tried to launch a career as a life coach, but without my money to fund the website and the marketing, it had failed to launch. She was working part-time at a high-end boutique, a job she apparently hated. Leo was completely out of the picture. He had gotten engaged to another woman, and he and his new fiancée had made it very clear that Clara was not a part of their modern, fluid family. The final, unexpected encounter happened last month. I was at a charity auction with Sarah. We were bidding on a piece of art, laughing and having a good time. I looked across the crowded room and I saw her. She was there as a volunteer, one of the people in black aprons serving champagne and clearing plates. She saw me. She saw me with Sarah, a beautiful, successful woman, laughing at my side. She saw me looking happy, relaxed, and completely, utterly indifferent to her existence. Her face, for just a fraction of a second, crumpled. The mask of bored resentment she was wearing slipped, and I saw a flash of pure, unadulterated regret. She turned and disappeared into the kitchen before I could even register the moment completely. At a family reunion, my girlfriend's cousin asked when we were getting married. She laughed and said, "When my real options run out." Everyone chuckled. I just stood and left. 2 weeks later, she realized options run out fast. Family reunions are a special kind of hell. You spend a whole day making small talk with people you barely know, eating questionable potato salad, and pretending you're thrilled to be there. For me, last Saturday's reunion for my girlfriend's family wasn't just hell. It was the place my relationship went to die, and I was the one who pulled the plug. Let me set the scene. I'm Mark, 38. I own a logistics company. My girlfriend Sarah, who is 31, is all about the opposite. Her life is a series of emotional whims, social climbing, and a constant, desperate need for validation. For 3 years, I thought her chaos was exciting. Now I see it for what it is, a giant, flapping red flag. The problem wasn't just her personality. It was her family. They're old money, and they've never let me forget that I'm not. I'm a guy who started his company with a single van and a lot of debt. They're people who have never worked a real day in their lives. To them, I was a novelty. The working man their precious Sarah was slumming it with. The disrespect was usually subtle. A condescending comment about my truck, a backhanded compliment about how articulate I was for a guy who didn't go to an Ivy League school. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it didn't matter what these pampered snobs thought. But it was a slow poison, and Sarah was the one letting them administer it. The moment I knew I had to prepare for the end was about 6 months ago. We were at a charity gala her parents had dragged us to. I was talking to one of her father's business associates, a decent guy, about the challenges of supply chain management. Her father walked up, put his arm around me, and said with a booming laugh, "Don't let Mark fool you with his big words. He's just a glorified delivery boy." The associate laughed uncomfortably. I just looked at my half-eaten shrimp puff. Later that night, I saw Sarah laughing with her father as he retold the story to another group. That was it. That was the night I opened a new folder on my computer labeled Exit Strategy. Which brings us to the reunion. It was at her aunt's massive lake house. Dozens of people I didn't know, all with the same last name and the same smug, superior look on their faces. I was doing my best to be a good sport, but after 3 hours of talking about boat maintenance and the stock market, I was about ready to fake a heart attack to get out of there. Sarah had abandoned me within minutes of arriving, leaving me to fend for myself while she flitted between groups of her cousins, soaking up their attention. I was standing by the barbecue, trying to look interested in a conversation about golf with her uncle, when I saw her cousin, a loud, obnoxious girl named Brittany, corner Sarah. Brittany has always had it in for me. I think she sees me as a threat to their little blue-blooded bubble. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I heard the important part. Brittany, in a voice loud enough for the whole patio to hear, asked, "So, Sarah, when is Mark finally going to make an honest woman out of you? When are you two getting married?" Sarah laughed. It was a high, tinkling sound, the one she uses when she's trying to be cute and dismissive at the same time. She looked around at the circle of her family members who were listening, then she looked right at me and smirked. "Oh, Brittany, don't be silly," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We'll get married when my real options run out." The whole group chuckled. Her aunts, her cousins, even her dad cracked a smile. It was a joke, you see. A hilarious little jab at the guy who wasn't quite good enough, the guy who was just a placeholder until someone better came along. And in that moment, something inside me just went quiet. It wasn't anger, it wasn't hurt. It was the cold, hard click of a final decision being made. I had been a fool. I had been putting up with their condescension, their insults, their barely veiled contempt, all for a woman who saw me as her last resort. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her smiling face, at her family who were all laughing at my expense. I just stood there for a second, making eye contact with each of them. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't run, I didn't storm off. I just walked, at a calm, deliberate pace, through the party, out the front door, and to my truck. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. I didn't look back. I was done. Update 1. The drive home was 2 hours of pure, unadulterated silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't make any calls. I just drove, and with every mile that passed, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders that I didn't even realize I had been carrying. The weight of trying to be good enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. I got back to my house. My house, which she had moved into a year ago, but was still legally and financially all mine, around 8 o'clock. The first thing I did was walk to my home office and open the exit strategy file. I had already consulted a lawyer. I had already opened separate bank accounts. I had been preparing for this day, hoping it would never come, but knowing, deep down, that it was inevitable. My phone started blowing up about an hour after I got home. Her mother, her cousins, a storm of texts and missed calls. Where are you? What's wrong? You just left? That was so rude. I ignored them all. I just started executing the plan. First, the locks. I had a new high-security system installed a few months back. I told her it was for our safety. In reality, it was so I could change all the access codes and deactivate her key fob from my phone in under 30 seconds. Which I did. The perimeter was secure. Next, her belongings. I wasn't just going to pack them in boxes. That was too easy, too clean. I wanted to make a statement. A statement about how I was no longer going to be her safety net, her last resort. I went online and found the number for a local charity that does furniture and clothing pickups for women's shelters. I called them. I told the woman on the phone that I had a massive high-end donation. A whole house worth of women's clothing, furniture, and personal items. I mentioned some of the designer brands I knew Sarah owned. The woman was almost speechless. They were used to getting old, used things. This was a windfall. They said they could have a truck at my house at 9 a.m. the next morning. Perfect. The only things I set aside were her personal documents, her passport, her birth certificate, and a few sentimental items from her childhood that I knew she couldn't replace. I packed those in a small box. Everything else was fair game. The bed she slept in, the desk she worked at, the clothes she wore. All of it. At around midnight, I sent a single text to her father. He was the one who had chuckled the loudest at her joke. "Sir," the text read, "I am writing to inform you that my relationship with your daughter is over." Her comment at the reunion today made her position on our future quite clear. As such, I have taken the liberty of donating all of her belongings that were in my home to a local charity. They will be picked up in the morning. I have, however, set aside a box of her personal documents and keepsakes. Your daughter can arrange to pick this box up from my office tomorrow afternoon. Please do not attempt to contact me further. I hit send. Then I blocked his number, and every other number in her family that I had. I turned off my phone, poured myself a very large glass of whiskey, and sat on my back deck enjoying the silence of my own home for the first time in a long, long time. Update 2. The next morning, the charity truck arrived at 9 on the dot. It took the 3 guys who came with it over an hour to load everything. The closets, the dressers, the guest room she had turned into her personal office. All of it. Gone. The house felt empty, but in a good way, like it had been scrubbed clean. The real fireworks started around noon. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, was a smoldering crater of angry voicemails and texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Her friends, apparently. I deleted them all without listening. The confrontation I knew was coming. Around 2 o'clock, my doorbell camera pinged. It was Sarah, and she was not happy. She was with her cousin Brittany, the instigator of the whole incident. I opened the door but left the security chain on. "Mark, what the hell is going on?" Sarah screamed. "My father said you gave all my things away. Is that a joke?" "No joke," I said calmly. "I figured since you're in the market for new options, you'd want a fresh start. I just helped you along." Brittany stepped forward, her face a mask of outrage. "You are a monster. She loved you. She was going to marry you." "No," I corrected her. "She was going to marry me when her real options that ran out. I just decided to take myself out of the running for last place. It's a respectable move. It's called forfeiting the race." Sarah started crying then. Big, theatrical tears. "But my clothes, my furniture, that was all expensive stuff. My grandmother's antique vanity." "I know," I said, "and I'm sure a woman who has nothing will be very grateful for your grandmother's vanity. Think of it as a good deed, a way to cleanse your soul." "I'm calling the police," she shrieked. "You stole my property." "Go ahead," I said, "and I will show them the text message I have from your father, acknowledging that I was giving you the opportunity to retrieve your personal documents. I will also be happy to provide them with a list of the dozen or so family members who were witness to your public declaration that our relationship was a joke and that I was your last resort." "It's called establishing motive, Sarah. I don't think you want to go down that road." She knew she was beaten. Her tears turned to rage. "You will regret this, Mark. My father will ruin you." "Your father can't touch me," I said. "I built my business from the ground up with my own 2 hands. I don't have a trust fund to fall back on. I have something better, self-respect. You should try it sometime." I closed the door and locked it. The last thing I heard was her screaming my name. It was the sound of an option that had just officially run out. Final update. It has been 6 months. The legal threats from her father, as I predicted, never materialized. He's a bully, but he's not a stupid one. He knew that a public lawsuit would just air his family's dirty laundry for the world to see. The smear campaign they tried to launch, however, was a different story. It was a coordinated effort, led by Brittany and Sarah's other cousins. The narrative was that I was a volatile, insecure man who couldn't take a joke. They said I had a breakdown, cruelly donated all of Sarah's things out of spite, and that she was lucky to have escaped me. For a few weeks, I just ignored it. I didn't care what they thought. But then it started to affect my business. One of Sarah's uncles, a guy with a lot of connections in the city, started spreading rumors. I lost a couple of potential clients because of it. That's when I knew I had to fight back. I didn't do it publicly. I did it my way. With logistics. I hired a private investigator, a good one. I gave him one target, Brittany. I had a hunch that the loudest mouth was probably hiding the most secrets. It took him a week, and what he found was pure gold. Brittany, the perfect little socialite, was having an affair with a married man. A very prominent, very wealthy, and very married man who happened to be one of her father's biggest business rivals. She was also using a company credit card from her cushy, do-nothing job at her father's company to pay for their hotel rooms and expensive dinners. I put it all together in a neat little file. The hotel receipts, the text messages, the photos. Then I sent it in a plain manila envelope to Brittany's father. There was no note. There didn't need to be. The smear campaign stopped overnight. The rumors about me vanished. Brittany's social media went dark. I heard from a friend that her father had completely cut her off, and that her secret boyfriend's wife had filed for a very messy, very public divorce. Sarah's life, from what I've heard, has been a series of hard landings. Without me to pay her bills and provide a comfortable home, she had to move back in with her parents. The shame of that, for someone so obsessed with appearances, must have been excruciating. She had to get a real job, and she is apparently terrible at it. The world, it turns out, is not as impressed with her as she is with herself. Her family, the ones who chuckled at her cruel joke, have also faced a quiet kind of fallout. The story of what happened at the reunion, followed by the scandal with Brittany, has apparently made them social pariahs in their own circle. It's hard to maintain a reputation for class and dignity when everyone knows you're a bunch of backstabbing, arrogant bullies. I saw her once a few weeks ago. I was at one of my restaurants having dinner with my new girlfriend, a woman who is my partner, not my charity case. Sarah walked in with a group of her friends. She saw me. Our eyes met. The look on her face was a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, regret. She and her friends turned around and walked right back out. The ultimate revenge wasn't about the donated clothes or the locked door. It was about forcing them to live in the world they had created for themselves. A world where I was not an option at all. She saw our relationship as a safety net, a last resort she could fall back on when her better options didn't pan out. All I did was remove the net. I let her fall. And from what I hear, she's still falling. She wanted to wait until her options ran out. I just sped up the process, and in doing so, I opened up a world of new, better options for myself. And I haven't looked back.